Hey everybody, it's CJ Graham, Jason Voorhees. That's right, Friday the 13th, part 6. And you're listening to thescenesnobs.com.
Animal like drinking! We're drinking. Cheers. One more. Hear that? Sounds pretty good for the oil. Three. All these variations. Your lifestyle.
Happy Valentine's.
And now, live for your entertainment, it's The Showcase. Hosted by the big man with the big heart, Mick Manhattan.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. This is The Showcase. I am Mick Manhattan. Of course, as you saw in our brand new intro done by Venom Podcast Studios. Thank you for that. That's wonderful. He is great. You can go check him out. And if you need anything done, videos or any work like that, voiceover work, stuff like that, I will link it in the description. So he's doing all the videos for the Scene Snobs now. I'm very excited. So today we are very excited. I have two guests here I've been looking forward to talking to for a long time. They have an amazing podcast. If you guys haven't checked it out, it's called Monster Movie Happy Hour. And it right here, I have their sticker on my laptop. It's a wonderful sticker. It's an awesome emblem. It's 2/3 of the hosts are with us tonight. Mary couldn't be here, but we're very excited to talk to him. I'm going to talk to him about what their show's about, how it started, and what's going, their love of horror movies, which, I share in. And I love their show because they talk about horror movies that you really don't often hear in many other podcasts. So right now we're going to have Scott coming on in a few, but I'm going to bring Dave on. Dave, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Mick, how are you?
Very good. Oh, here's Scott.
Hooray.
God, what's going on, guys?
Look at that. 2/3 are here.
I love it. I'm so glad you guys could join on the show tonight. I'm so stoked to talk to you. Wow. You guys have a great show, and I gush over it a lot. I tell people a lot. Monster Movie Happy Hour it's one of my favorite horror podcasts out there right now. So if any of you listen out there and you love horror movies, go check it out now, and it will be in the description, so you can click on the links.
That's really flattering, considering in the strictest sense. As Dave, I'm sure will agree, where there's elements of a review show, it's really more or less us just talking. Sometimes it's more review, sometimes it's just opinion, sometimes I don't know what it is. So sometimes it's just prattling.
Well, I'm pretty sure most of our listeners wonder what it's about sometimes. Essentially, Mick, as you probably have gathered, it's just an extension of what Scott and I and Mary were doing, for a few years before we started to do a podcast. And, the three of us would get together and we started calling ourselves the Monster Movie Happy Hour because we'd watch, some old movies and have some cocktails. And then the pandemic hit, shortly after we started the podcast. And so whereas before the three of us would literally be in the same space, we would watch the movie together. And then we react to it. We haven't really been able to do that now. And essentially, how long? Well,
a year.
Yeah. It's so crazy that it's like that. And, but you guys are still putting out great content, and you still feels like even though you're not together and you're recording, that you are together.
Right? Yeah. What you say, Scott? As excuse me, I'm just look at my rotten hair. Oh my God, vanity strikes. No, but it doesn't feel quite the same. But there is still a. Do you have anybody on staff who could do my hair for me for just a moment here?
So get my assistant.
So, waiting back in the green room, and I expected like makeup and hair and
They're
Snap.
still on the road to Minnesota.
Gotcha.
Be there soon.
Story. Anyway, I don't know what were we.
So
This
you know,
unfortunately is what the show is exactly like.
it's
I'm surprised anybody listens to us.
it's like Dave said, it's the kind of thing we were doing before. But when we record an episode, there's a half an hour to 45 minutes of administrative stuff that we have to take care of, and then just talking and catching up and whatever we haven't been doing throughout the week via mostly text, but occasionally short calls or short Zoom calls.
Yep.
And then depending upon how much Dave's workload is imposing upon him, Dave's the one who does the editing. Sometimes, he does a super spiffy job of editing and manages to get it down to a reasonable amount. Other times, he just doesn't have the. He's not as cruel and heartless as I am, and isn't willing to edit. And so then you have our poor listeners who have to sit there listen to an hour and 45-minute episodes, which is like.
Oof.
I wouldn't want to.
No. Folks, run away from us. Run screaming.
So
do not listen to us.
One thing about your show I love, it spans so many decades. A lot of horror podcasts don't really do that. Now you cover recent movies. You cover, of course, our beloved 80s slasher, 80, all 80s. And you will go back too. I mean, you will go back to not just Universal monsters, but some of the wonderful creature features of the 50s. I mean, you really do cover, and the Hammer films, of course.
Yeah, we're particular suckers for those Hammer films. Scott and I admittedly are Anglophiles, even if we recognize that, and we're also historians, but even as we recognize that the British Empire was a big ruthless machine that ground its subjects to paste, and we're still dealing with it. Scott and I still secretly or not so secretly want to be wearing tweed, sipping scotch around a fire. Yes. And Scott with his hounds in. People refer to him as Squire Cheeseborough. Right. So
some exclusive club.
Yeah, exactly. And we let Mary in because she's Mary, right? But But largely it's we love those Hammer movies. We really like a little bit of everything. Is that safe to say, Scott?
I think so, and I think part of it is really by design, because at least to a certain degree, just because by virtue of our having nearly been here as long as Methuselah, we're more familiar with the panacea of films, and it just through osmosis have seen or know about some of these movies. So, things that somebody in their 20s or 30s might not be aware of or only peripherally aware of, will go, oh, well, let's watch that. I mean, sometimes there's, of course, between Dave and I and Mary, we watch all kinds of movies that obviously haven't been on the podcast yet. And I could throw out 6 or 7 films right now that I'd go, oh, well, let's watch that. Let's watch that. But I think, yeah, I mean, you look at the Twitter community, the mutant family, horror fam. I would say that my impression is that the vast majority of people on there are really interested in 80s and 90s stuff and more recent stuff. And therefore, we try to mix it up, like you say. And so, we just watched something from 1970, and the next, the upcoming film is more recent.
What was it, Scott? We just did a couple days ago.
See, now I can remember the film now, but I can't remember the title. There's another proof that we're so ancient.
I don't think we're spoiling too much by saying that we rewatched
The Witch
by Robert Eggers, and as history, we love that movie. We understand why some people maybe don't, but man,
Right, and the next film that we have after that is another movie from 2000, between 2000 and 2020.
Yeah, just from the last few years. So we really have been trying to stretch a little bit.
It's likely that, we will have, when we discuss what we're going to watch upcoming, that we'll go, oh, well, we've watched a bunch of recent films. Let's go back to, whatever, and do something older. For no other reason, I think that one of the things that we do, aside from we're hoping to do, especially with some of these older films, is act as sort of a catalyst for people who watch or to watch something older, just to well, they say it might be okay, so maybe I'll see it. I grew up with a daughter who initially, when I was trying to quote unquote educate her in film, told me at about age 10, and this is some time ago now because my daughter is 30 plus years old. She told me, I don't want to watch this because black and white movies are boring. And I was like, oh, no. And so eventually, we worked that out, and that's not the case anymore. But she told me something to the effect of, and my daughter obviously is not the be all and end all, but she told me something to the effect of, well, everybody thinks black and white movies are boring. And I was like, no, they don't.
You think black and white movies are boring? Be honest.
Me? No way. I love them. I will say this, though. I'm having the same sort of trouble. My son just turned 9, and my 4-year-old, he's not even there yet.
Yeah.
But the 9-year-old has been really into the older movies I'm showing him, and but I want to get him into black and white. Now, he's watched some with me. He's watched Carnival of Souls. It was a little bit, I think, ahead of his time.
Oh, that's pretty cool, though, because, Jesus, Mick, I didn't see Carnival of Souls until in my 40s.
Yeah. I
already got a leg up on me.
It was playing at the local theater here, and I was like, yeah, I got to go see this. And he sat down, and he wasn't so much into that, but I guess like 2 weeks later, we went and saw the original Japanese version of Godzilla.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all subtitles. And I was so worried. I'm like, he's going to hate this, but he loved it.
Did he really? Oh, that's great to hear.
He was in on it from beginning to end. And so it got me thinking, introducing kids, especially, I would say to horror, but in general, just black and white films.
Yeah.
Where do you start? Like, what are good introductions to black and white films for kids?
Wow.
Well,
I think Frankenstein's a great one if you want to try to,
I love that one too. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I guess Scott and I have perhaps different ideas, and certainly Mary does have different ideas about the age appropriateness of certain movies. That's a running thing with us. But I think Frankenstein would be a great one.
Frankenstein would be a good one, and I would contend, if you're talking about a kid 10 years or older, I would say Night of the Living Dead from 1968.
That's one of my favorites of all time.
Which is a great movie, but by today's standards, which it's really not that bad, as far as gore or violence. There's a lot of implied stuff, but I think that movie scared the head out. I saw it when I was 10. That was the first time I saw it. It scared the hell out of me when I was 10, but I wasn't psych damaged.
Yeah,
wasn't damaged.
Dave, your mic's done. Your mic's done.
No. Am I back now?
You're all good.
Okay. Well, I think I'd have to agree with Scott largely. That would be a great choice. I do think that there's such a palpable sense of dread with that movie, however. The fact that it's in black and white and you don't see a lot of blood is true, but on the other hand, there's a hell of a sense of threat throughout that entire movie. It's almost, it feels to me like the whole world just sort of tipped 10 degrees off kilter throughout the entire movie. So, when my grandkids reach that magic age, they're a couple years away, I'm going to drop that one on them. And if it doesn't work, Scott, we're coming after you.
And another one that I would from my perspective, you should be able to watch our show to kids. As long as you give them a sort of a lead in and say, okay, well, here's the kind of thing you're going to expect is, a movie like Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
And almost a lot of the, like you mentioned, a lot of these 50s movies really are a good segue to something more serious, something, that's got a bit more impact. But, these giant bug movies or another monster movie that I'd recommend, even though the movie is fair to Midland, is The Mole People, because there's monsters in it and they're a threat. But nobody gets eviscerated or anything like that. It's all implied.
He really liked Them. He thought Them was really good.
Okay, yeah. One I was just about to suggest maybe Them, because that kind of works on, I think, a couple levels. You got the adventure aspect of it, the mystery aspect of it. You got, I think, even by contemporary standards, kind of cool looking giant ants, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they look awesome for the time, especially.
And great sort of chittering sounds too. I love it.
Right. And the other movies that I would recommend for kids would be like any of the Harryhausen films.
Yeah.
Some of the early stuff like Earth versus the Flying Saucers, some of the later stuff like Jason the Argonauts, or
Nice.
Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. There's and again, you might have a kid who's going to look at that and go, well, that looks fake. But you say, okay, we'll give it a chance and roll with it. And then you can either, in the course of the movie, you can explain stop motion and what's going on, or you can say, well, I'll tell you, something about that after the movie's over. But Dave and I and Mary and I have discussed this sort of same thing that you have when you listen to a radio drama, is that you can watch a movie that we've all become sophisticated enough, or we've learned what the tricks of the trade were at the time when those movies were made, and it's not really a giant ape in the original King Kong, or any King Kong for that matter, but it's not a giant ape, and how stop motion works. But if you go with the spirit of the movie, I contend that intellectually you can suspend that cynicism and enjoy it as a pure story, even though well, that's really an ape that's 18 inches tall, and it's not real. And, just like any monster movie or any movie, I mean, it's not real. And therefore you could just go, well, this isn't real, So
I think to piggyback on that, and Mick, I'm sure you would probably agree too. As a viewer, it's easier to handle the chills and thrills and the scares in the movie when you can recognize that it is, in fact, a person in a costume, or it's a puppet, and you can still enjoy it. I think you do sort of, and kids are great at this because they love watching puppet shows. That somebody's hand stuck up the back end of a sock puppet or something. They still get into it. So I think Scott kind of hit it right on the head there. And I would even slide forward up to Dragon Slayer.
Sure.
Yeah, good choice.
That amazing dragon with the stop motion, go motion by Phil Tippett. I still think that's probably one of the best dragons put on screen, quite frankly. And to realize that it was his puppet. And I just discovered that Chris Wallace, who did,
The Fly.
He did The Fly, he directed Fly 2. He did The Fly, the creature, did Rumble Fly and all that. He did he made the Gremlins. He never killed them. But he actually made some puppet stuff for Dragon Slayer 2. So I'm sort of in a Chris Wallace fanboy mood.
I love it.
Mick, I saw that there was somebody had asked a question regarding our thoughts on Full Moon.
Yes, that was Jason asked on Full Moon Films, the Puppet Master and Killjoy.
Sure. I don't know, Scott. I haven't seen Killjoy. I've seen Puppet Master, and I've seen a handful of Full Moon. I find them very entertaining. You know.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's maybe something that I need to continually remind myself about is the fact that there's a broad spectrum within the genre, and I think we do ourselves a disfavor by discounting any one part of it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Limit is anything that is sort of in the torture porn realm. I haven't seen the Serbian film. I have no desire to see that.
No.
But the real world scares the shit out of me right now. So I tend to prefer my horror slightly more fantastic, or at least more historical. But yeah, some of those Full Moon movies are a blast.
Oh yeah, I mean a lot of fun, and I think there's a lost art to what '90s did for horror. Now, I mean, it was in that weird realm where like things were kind of on its way out, but we saw a lot of films that I don't think people still understand to this day how culturally they stand up. Tales from the Hood being a great film. People Under the Stairs.
Yeah,
that's a great movie.
That was Wes Craven, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
And, you know that we saw actually a lot of black films, horror films, come into that time in the '90s. That the door started to open to be able to do that, and I mean, a lot of people put down, I think, Tales from the Hood just based on the title alone, and not having seen it. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me! This is one of the best movies out there that you can check out.
I cut every one of these movies as much slack as I can. The only thing I ask is that either be entertaining or engages me on, and I hate to use this word because it doesn't apply to me, but on an intellectual level. You know? And I think a perfect example is what Scott and I were just saying, you know, about The Witch, having just rewatched it again for the umpteenth time. And I mentioned during the episode a number of movies that I personally like that take place in the 1600s. Alexander General and Hex and Field in England and The Blood on Satan's Claw and a lot of those British folklore that take place somewhere after the Renaissance, but up to what we think of as the colonial era. That just like for me is like a sweet spot because I'm fascinated with that period of history. And then you layer the horror in there and the fact that so many people believed in witches at that time and had a very strong sense that it was all very real. It's just like tailor-made for this kind of movie.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to always give you an entertaining movie in the classics of the traditional sense. And I totally understand that. It just happens to be something that scratches that particular eye. It's what I have, and I know Scott feels the same way. I think Henry does, quite frankly.
Ultimately, not just in the genre, but ultimately, an entertaining film is different, or you can have an entertaining film that is not a substantial film or not a film with gravitas. There's all that, like Dave said, there's a wide panacea of films that we enjoy. But if I was a critic, there are films that I enjoy but I would say this movie is not up to snuff at all, or it's like the kind of movies that where I still enjoy it, but it's like it looks like they gathered people from the neighborhood to make up most of the cast, and some people are okay, and others are like, well, okay, that could have been anybody they grabbed off the street. And same thing with, Dave and Mary and I have had endless discussions about the progression of blood in movies and the color of blood and the viscosity of blood and how realistic the blood is. It's like, I mean, even recent movies, even relatively recent for somebody like me, movies in the 70s and 80s, some of those movies, it's like you look at the blood and it's like, man, that's way too pink. How did they look at that and go, yeah, that cuts it. That looks good. It's just, but again, then I go back to the whole thing of like, okay, well, I accept it. In this universe, blood looks pink and it's thinner. It's like, okay.
Think about the blood in some of those Hammer movies, where everything is just like the colors ramped up, and that's not necessarily a real blood color, but artistically, damn, does it look good. And this reminds me of something, and I think we can get away with telling the story. So we're friends with Ryan Shadley, who in the Twin Cities here is a special makeup effects artist, and he's awesome. We just love Ryan. He did some work on the Wrong Turn movie that just came out, and it was the anthology that we really enjoyed recently. He worked on
Scare Package.
Yeah,
Scare Package was great.
Yeah, he worked on a movie where I'm Not a Serial Killer, I think, with Christopher Lloyd. It was filmed.
Yep.
So, but my point is this: so we were fortunate enough to go over and hang out in the studio, and at one point he accidentally nicked himself. And I thought, what the hell is he doing? And he dashed across the studio to this container. And he dipped into the container and held out the fake blood and put it next to his real blood to compare and see if his formula looked anything like the blood that was coming out of his body. So I just gave him extra points for, dedication. He's actually a fascinating guy. He's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And the fun part with that is too, like throughout time, and to see, let's just take blood. Let's use that as our horror staple through the years, and to see how much it changes, but how stylized it comes in each decade, even, and where it goes. Like you were saying, Scott, like in some it could be pinkish, but like if you get to those Hammer horror, like you said. I mean, some of those reds were just.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's a work of art.
That's the color of blood I want coming out of my body.
Yeah, you don't want I don't want the realistic. I want that color. There's something about it that's just.
Artistically, there is something to be said for that. Yeah. And I don't know if that was a conscious decision or that was simply what they had, and they knew that it would show up. It would look red and shocking, and Hammer was the first studio to really. With a few exceptions, to really showcase the blood and the breasts and the beasts. But think about some of the blood we've seen in the last decade or so, or something. It just turns my stomach because sometimes it looks really good. Sometimes it's blackish, and and the profusion, the amount that comes pouring out of some bodies these days. It's shocking, and the 10-year-old in me thinks it's awesome.
Yes.
See, I'm giddy thinking about it. What is that?
To even go back to the black and white and go back to Night of the Living Dead, especially what they used with the almost the chocolate sauce,
Yeah.
And then the color not even color, but it just had that look that was just perfect for even that time,
Sure.
Your mind fills in the blanks. That dark stuff coming out of that head or next to that body is blood. That movie to me is still. I think it's a masterwork. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy a lot of Romero's pictures, but for me, it'll always come back to that. And then Dawn of the Dead. Oh, Katie says there's something to be said for candy-colored Suspiria blood. Hey, here.
Yeah.
I'm with you there, Katie.
Suspiria is a great film just from a color aspect. You could watch that movie endlessly just for the color of it.
There is, and it's oddly in the title, but there's nothing. I think the best use of color, especially blood and red, is deep red.
Oh yeah, I can't argue with that.
Right. And just what he did with those colors in the movie was just still mind-boggling to me.
I feel like I didn't do it justice when we did our episode. When was that?
One thing I will say, Katie, the Sweeney Todd from I think it was the 70s. if you haven't seen that one, check that one out.
Oh, I don't even know about that one.
There's a good one, and it's not a musical. It's just a straight movie.
Sure.
Really well done. I'm trying to think of the star's name.
Is it British production?
Yeah. God, what is it? I'll think of it. I think it's from '79, and I forget.
Wow.
Who. Yeah, it was. There's a.
I don't know. I missed that.
Let me look at it because it's going to drive me crazy, and I know there's a.
Let us know. I was just going to say, in regards to Red, I made a cocktail for the night, and with a name like Mick Manhattan, you knew what I had to make. So there you go.
I very much appreciate that. I love it. I wish I had one.
I'm just lazy. See, all I made was a gin and juice. So.
But you got an awesome glass cut that I just see tentacles.
Yeah.
But it is red.
Well,
in terms of the whole cocktail aspect of our show, our viewers are more or less, I think they're savvy enough now to recognize that when I'm responsible for making the cocktail for an episode, you really might want to think twice about making it. But if Scott or Mary, I think you're in the hands. Mary made one for The Witch the other day that was one of the best, I think.
Okay, as a countervailing argument to Dave's statement, one who's listened to the podcast a long time has to know that Dave is by nature a super self-depreciating individual, and so even if he made a decent cocktail, he would say, well, it's not really that good and yours is better. So Dave would never or rarely say that he'd made a good cocktail. So I would argue that that's not necessarily true.
And I would argue that Scott is biased. But at any rate, I contend that Scott and Mary do come up with the best cocktails. And
you guys all do, man. It's so amazing to me, just how you fasten each drink to what you're talking about. And I do shows. I couldn't imagine doing that, being that creative.
Well, I would say that it's like playing sports ball, says the man who has spent his entire life being a book nerd. Whenever I play sports ball, I suck. You win some and you lose some, and so I crafted a few that were certainly worth revisiting from time to time. But it provides us with just another thing to kind of laugh about, and for us, it's what we would have been doing anyhow. Like I said before, the whole podcast was really just an outgrowth of what we were doing as friends. And some of you maybe already know this, but Scott, was it about a year and a half ago? We were at Gettysburg. I was at Gettysburg doing our artist program through the National Park Service with my dear wife. And so she was writing and I was painting. But the point is, it just happened that Joe, Bob, and Darcy were at Creature Features in Gettysburg one of the weekends that I was out there. And I thought, there's no way in hell we're not going to, see these guys. And so Mary flew out and joined us. And we spent time at the convention walking around with our Monster Movie Happy Hour shirts. This is pre-podcast. And we had so many people walk up to us and ask if we had a podcast or a show. And we thought, oh, crap. So we went back to the motel room, and within about an hour, we convinced ourselves that, okay, maybe we should, And I'm glad we did, because we've connected to people like you, the folks who are listening tonight.
And we're constantly astounded at the amount of people that follow us. Although it's a joke amongst us of that I don't know, based on Twitter, we've got somewhere like 4,700 people following us supposedly. Our contention is that about 10% of that is listening to us. If that, I think that would be a very good day. That would be a very good day.
There's so many out there, and I tell you, that fall in love with your show because of what your show is doing. I'm going to gush a little bit here. So
please do. My self-deprecating, upper Midwestern personality normally would say no, but what the hell? Bring it on.
It's just a truly wonderful show, you guys. I do feel that you have, and one of the things I love about good podcasts is they make you feel like you're in the room hanging out while you're listening to them, and that is, it's like that. But there's a sophistication to it. You Dave, you had said earlier, it's almost like we want to put on our tweed jackets and sit around. And I'm like, I almost feel that. I almost feel like the guys from Ghost Story sitting in the chairs talking to each other.
Yes, we want everybody to be part of our chowder society.
I love it, and that's why so many people, when I see the comments, I see everybody following, love it too. And it's because that you're not boastful. You're coming in there, you're just having a fun conversation. You know what you're talking about. You do your research. That's so important. But you're welcoming, and that's why it's such a great show. You're so welcoming to everybody else. You know. And it is a great logo. You are correct, John.
John's biased. John's
Well,
he has to do that.
You know, despite
Nice things.
despite being a snob personally, you know, I would. I think that we're all of the same mind in that we would never be. We would never want to come across as elitist, you know, amongst listeners and amongst quite frankly amongst the movies that we watch, because while you may watch what's generally considered a really high quality movie like The Witch, we can appreciate that movie, but we can also appreciate a movie like Plan 9 from Outer Space. Yeah. You know, because in our mind, in spite of, you know, obvious differences, they both have things to they both entertain us, you know, and as we often say towards the end of every episode, you know, we appreciate every effort that all the people involved in these productions of these movies put forth. You know, it's very rare where you have a movie, even if it's a total shit show, that the people behind it aren't sincere in what they're trying to do. There might be some occasions, but really, that's the way we look at it. So it's like, okay, and even if Dave and Mary and I thought a movie was crap, you know, we would probably be pretty gentle about it. We would just say, yeah, okay. And we would never say that those people weren't putting the best foot forward, or they had a limited amount of funds, or, you know, any number of a litany of things that could been the reason for the film being less than. So, yeah, I would never want to be one of those shows that spends a half an hour saying how crappy something is. Now we can say, okay, well, you know, we've had conversations about in Hammer films where it's like, because we're so interested in the minutia of history, we'll look at it and go, well, I don't know if this was supposed to be the 1820s or the 1840s, and the cut of the jacket wasn't right, and, you know, that kind of stuff. but it doesn't. Even when I watch this movie without the rest of the monster movie happy hour, I look at films like that all the time, and I have to remind myself, you know, this movie is not a documentary. It's not documenting the wardrobes of people in the 19th century. It's a historical movie, or it's a genre movie. And it's like, so, you know, shut up and watch the movie, you know? So
I love it. You know, one thing I've always said, I have a lot of blowback on that, but I've said, I don't think there's any such thing as a truly bad movie in the sense. Now, I understand that there's not good movies. That's the way I like to look at it. Bad movies in the sense that there isn't something you can take away from it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, look at it this way. Every time you go into an art museum, and I encourage you to do this as soon as you're allowed to, of course, you're going to be bombarded with things that you are either attracted to or not interested in, or quite frankly, maybe even repelled by, but you can't help but recognize that somebody somebody had a vision. Somebody felt the need to create something. And knowing how, really people within the industry, very few of them are getting rich doing any of this, up to and including the directors. Producers, maybe, some of them. And certainly top-notch folks do well, but the overwhelming majority of the movies that we have watched, stretching all the way back into the past, and stuff that was made within the last year, these people are not living, the lifestyle of that upper 1%. So they're doing it for a reason. If they're like Michael Caine, they're doing it to pay the bills. And every now and then, he just knocks it out of the park and goes, damn, that guy's good. But it's a solid effort on folks' part. And I'm just quite frankly amazed that anything ever works out as well as it does. Yeah. If you get more than 2 people together on a creative project, you already have problems. So let's throw 50 or 200 people on a project and see how it comes together. It's actually amazing to me that some of these movies, even the not so good ones, work as well as they do, because it's this huge stew, and all it takes is one part of it to just not be quite right, and you taste the difference. But in my case, you still compliment the cook because they didn't set out to feed you a load of shit. I mean, somebody wanted to entertain you, or somebody had an idea they wanted to translate.
Even if it's a movie which I would contend a lot of the genre films that we're all interested in, even where it's evident that the producers of the film are looking to make a quick buck, usually those are the sorts of movies where something has been a hit, and then there's a cascade of copycats. Like all the movies that came out after Jaws about sharks. It's like, okay, I can watch this movie because it's entertaining from a nostalgia point of view, or it's entertaining because, it's got some actor in it who they paid, 6 figures to be in this movie that I enjoy, those sorts of things. I mean, there's plenty of movies out there that we all know are, looking to make a quick buck, or were looking to make a quick buck. Yeah. But they can still be entertaining.
That's one thing too, though. But on those movies, there are people who are working on them and want to see.
That's right.
Success.
That's right.
And, that's one thing I love about things like that. And I've always kind of equated it to that line from Pirates of the Caribbean when he goes, "You have to be the worst pirate I have ever heard of," and he goes, "But you have heard of me." And I think about that with a movie, like if somebody says this has to be the worst movie I've ever seen, but I'm like, but you've seen it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree.
And they literally created this thing out of, dreams, duct tape, paint, film stock, whatever. They managed to pull the damn thing off. So it's rare that I ever regret having watched a movie. There's almost always something. I'd be curious to know, though, Mick, what is your? This is, I mean, it's obviously connected, but it's a bit off in a different tangent, which is, of course, par for the course with our show.
Yes.
The first movie theater experience you recall from your childhood?
It was the first movie I ever saw. I was 5 years old, and they're showing. It was kind of like a revival, or they brought it back. It was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Oh, awesome! What a great movie! It's magic, right?
I think that probably for a lot of people, it's probably a Disney film of one kind or another. Sure. And for myself. Back in the early 60s, it was Bambi. So that was the first movie I remember seeing in the theater. So
Scott, that may be one of the first I ever saw in the theater. I'm just not quite old enough to have seen all those really, like the great Disneys in their first one, obviously. But
oh no, well, obviously, I think Bambi was released in the 40s sometime. That's 20 years later.
God, I'm not that one right now. But But the point is, I think it probably was either that, or it might have been like the Swiss Family Robinson or Peter Pan or something like that.
Yep.
But but at some point, by the time I was 6, my dear aunt had taken me to see at the drive-in night. I saw the Valley of Gwangi, which is the stop-motion Cowboys Dinosaurs movie created by Ray Harryhausen, and it was a double feature. And then they showed Tron with Joan Crawford in one of her final roles, and I love those damn movies. I really did, but I was like 6 years old,
Those are good ones for that age,
This is the same woman, however, that also introduced me to Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds that same year. And to see that farmer, lying at the front of the room with his eyes pecked out, freaked me the hell out. Still does to this day. I literally had nightmares about it. But you know what? Every time it was on, I had to watch it. So, So Mick, let's see. When you were a teenager, what were some of the really cool horror movies you saw in the theater?
I will say Scream. Scream stuck out to me because I was a freshman when that came out.
Sure.
So that was like everybody was wearing the same thing like I was going to school in. So like it really I recognize that movie. Even when I watch it now, I look back and I'm like, I can't believe that was the style, but it was.
Everyone does that, I think.
So that was one that really stuck out to me.
Yep.
But being a teenager and kind of going forward and seeing the resurgence of horror from Scream and what it produced.
Yes.
And being a fan of horror before that, but like these were the movies that they were teens the same time I was a teen. So
that's a special experience.
Yeah.
You are you're almost the target, right? I mean, you're joined at the hip at that point. So.
Yeah, and the Faculty, No Shit Last Summer, all those movies at that time that were, and there were plenty of bad ones. And when I say bad, I still love them.
Right, yeah. I get it.
Here, trust me. Yeah.
But, there's so many at that time, and it seemed like everybody who was on the WB was somehow showing up in a movie, in a horror movie. But yeah, those spoke to me because it was something new, something fresh.
Yeah. And
then being a junior in high school, and you're so used to these teenage slasher or supernatural films, and then Blair Witch comes out.
Oh yeah.
And to have all of these people nowadays say, "Oh, that's a dumb movie. That's a dumb movie." I was like, "You don't understand."
You had to be there, right?
Yeah. That marketing was perfect, and it was a good movie. I don't understand why people hate it so much.
Hey, I tell you what, the last few frames of that movie still haunt me.
I was going to say it's very effective as far as I'm concerned. I mean,
there, facing into the corner.
However, the only thing I would say as a parent at that time was that my daughter, who must have been, again, I'm referring to my daughter because that's my touchstone for some things. She was convinced, she must have been like 12 or something. And the way that if you recall, the way that they promoted that film was that it was a true story. And there was some website or something that she went to, and I remember us having arguments about it. And she was like, "No, it's on this website." And I'm like, "It's not true. There's no place like that. I can guarantee it." And I was kind of inclined to be sort of pissed off at the movie, even though it was a good movie. I was like,
"Oh man, you were the wet blanket." Come on.
Yeah, well, she didn't. Of course, she wasn't old enough to see it quite at that time. But so it was a few years later. But like I say, I was like, it's not true. And so she was all freaked out about it. And I was like, thanks a lot, producers of this movie. Just what I want.
And I will tell you, I remember that summer, everybody arguing around the grill or something, and me being young saying, "No, it is real. It's obviously real. They're saying it's real," because the internet was so new, and who knew? And actually, it was funny because we actually had All Right says The Birth of Internet Lies, and I fell for it. Yeah. I was like, "Yeah, no, hook, line, and sinker. This is real." And then I have older cousins and aunts and uncles saying, "No, it's not."
I mean, it's really sort of a different phenomenon because it was pre-internet, but I remember the same sorts of arguments at the time of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because that's the way they promoted that as a true story. And of course, it's based off of, like a number of films have been based off of, the story of Ed Gein, this guy in Wisconsin, and who did horrible things with dead bodies, but it was like, okay, it's about somebody who does things with dead bodies, and that's where everything ends. And I remember arguments at the time going, how come if this is true, if this was really true and this really happened, how come I can't find anything about it in at the library or in newspapers? It's like, what the hell? It's true,
Scott took it to that extreme.
Yeah.
Playing Scott right there.
Yeah.
I have a confession to make. I'm going to do it right now. I've only seen that. Won't tell anybody.
I'll tell you, like, movies like that just
once. I've only seen it once.
Yeah, but I feel like you remember it. It's those are the movies that are most memorable to you, and it's such.
Well, Mick, one thing that Scott and Mary and I bring up on almost every episode is if we mention a movie that we really like, whether something we just reviewed or something that we, watched last year, there's a good chance that Scott and I will say, I only watch this maybe once a year, because I don't want the repetition to ruin the feeling of rediscovery. So the movies that I like the most are the ones that I'll watch the least. Because I want to reserve that feeling of wonder and surprise and shock as long as possible, and I try to watch it without like the visual artists makeup effects goggles on, because I want to be able to just enjoy it as a story, as an experience, separate from the act of creating it. So The Witch, I'll watch it now maybe once a year. The Thing, probably my favorite sci-fi horror movie of all time, and I love the original one from the 50s. I absolutely love that movie. These movies work on different levels for me. I at most watch it once a year, maybe once every 2 years.
First snow for me. If it snows, I watch The Thing. I have to. It's just
I totally get it. But I've seen some movies so many times that I no longer get that feeling from them, and I don't want to ruin that. If something's that pure, and this is purely a personal opinion, I like to reserve it. Like, for instance, Saving Private Ryan. I've seen the whole movie maybe 3 times since it came out, and every time that opening sequence happens with the gate coming down and the machine guns firing, it's like, oh shit, here we go again. I feel like a block of ice in my gut. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do with some of these movies.
That's a great point. I try to do the same. Like, if I don't like a movie, I give it a few years before I revisit it.
That's a great idea. That really is. There are some movies I need to give a second or third chance.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There are movies that I know when I was younger I watched, and I was like, I can't appreciate this now.
Oh, yeah.
And now I will go back, and I've waited 20, 25 years, and now I'm going back to them, and I'm like, I was right. The Shining was a movie that when I was a kid, that was the most boring movie I've ever watched in my life.
Sure.
Yeah.
But as I've gotten older, it's the scariest movie I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I've heard people talking about The Exorcist. They just, and I understand that. Scott and I both had the advantage of having been lads, young lads in our early teens or approaching our teens when that movie came out, and so I don't know about you, Scott, but I saw the physical effect that movie had on friends and neighbors. There was a woman who came into the house, at a party, and she talked about seeing this movie, and she said, I keep looking under my car when I go up to the garage now. Now, of course, there's no garage scene that I can remember in The Exorcist, but the point is it unnerved her.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to try to remember the context, the time during which these movies were made, and how absolutely transgressive they were. If you can step back and view them that way, I guarantee you'll have a much greater appreciation. And some of them still work. really, really well. And of course, as I get older, I think all three of us would agree. In fact, we just mentioned it. As you get older, you see things a bit differently. Stuff I could watch before I can't now, because anything dealing with children being killed or this, that, or the other. Now that I have grandchildren, I can't do it because I literally every day sort of worry that something bad is going to happen. So
Train to Busan and Cargo, movies like that. Ever since I've had, I had my kids, I'm just like, I can handle it once, but I have to put it away. Yeah. It's too much.
In those cases where you do, gut your way out and watch it, it's going to have don't you think, a much stronger emotional impact than say if you were a 17-year-old kid watching it with a bunch of friends where you spend half your time talking and half your time watching the screen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I had this happen when I was stationed in Okinawa back in, obviously not 1945 during the battle, but years later, things are very quiet and peaceful, thank God. But the point is that a bunch of us jarheads went to the base theater and we watched the Mary Lambert interpretation of Pet Sematary.
Oh, okay, nice.
Just read the summer before. I'm not kidding. When I read Pet Sematary, sitting on the beach at La Jolla, just off base from Camp Pendleton, I'm not exaggerating when I say this. It was a hot summer day, and I had an actual decent body for once in my frickin' life. But the point is, I'm reading Pet Sematary while the other jarheads are trying to pick up women or whatever, and I literally got chills sitting on that beach. It just punched me right in the gut. And I didn't have kids, so I didn't have the same connection, whatever. Yeah. A few years later, I saw it on the big screen on Okinawa, and my good friend, Sergeant Smith, said, I can't handle this, okay? Smitty had kids exact same age as Gage and his sister, and it unnerved him, and I didn't quite get that. You know what I mean? I understood it on a surface level. It wasn't until recently that I totally started to get that. So as with all these movies, you're going to bring different baggage to it. The movie has to deal with somebody who has dementia and is fading away. As an older person, you're probably going to relate to your parents or grandparents, right? So that's sort of the beauty of revisiting these movies from time to time. Stuff that you didn't think you'd like before, try it again now. And I would encourage you to watch. I'm talking to the 6,000 people that are listening to us right now.
You give me a lot of credit, sir.
50% of whom happen to be fans of our show, no doubt.
Yes.
If there's 6,000, it's probably 90%. I mean, they're definitely not the fans of my show.
Let's share statistics behind the scenes and have a laugh sometime. You want to?
Yes.
But I think I was going somewhere with this. Oh my God, I really was. I was about to say the most profound thing.
No, that's distressing.
Oh, that's even more than usually disappointing.
I gotta tell you guys, this has been truly amazing having you guys come on, and I could do this for like 3-4 more hours, and that's why I can listen to your shows back to back, because everybody watching, this is what it's like. It's a just fun conversation. Minus me, Mary's a lot more engaging than I am.
What are we up to, Dave? We're up to almost 50 episodes at this point.
We're getting close, and Mary provides a breath of fresh air, and she brings two different perspectives. She brings a female perspective. Mm-hmm. She brings
a younger perspective.
Which is really important because Scott and I are old white guys. We are.
Yeah.
So it's really nice. So we miss having you here. But thanks for letting us come on and just sort of ramble, Mick. I'm sorry we
enjoyed it.
No, listen, I love it, and I would keep going. The channel has another show starting. That's why the only reason I got to go. But I would love to have you guys back on anytime. I love this conversation.
I'd say we're probably open to it. Hopefully next time Mary can be here.
Yeah.
I'll have something, totally different to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah, you know what? I would actually love to hear you guys do an episode on The Exorcist too. I don't think I've ever heard you guys haven't done it, right?
We haven't.
Nope.
So many great movies, Mick, that we want to get to, but we're trying to bounce back and forth over about a 70-year time span. And try
to and I would contend that at least to a small degree, we try although we don't always succeed, we try to pick films that aren't necessarily were the big hits. You know, something that was not quite that big.
I think a perfect example of that. I'm sorry you're running out of time here. This is the Midwestern goodbye kicking in.
I love it.
Death on a stick, because it happens in every episode. But I love Let's Scare Jessica to Death.
Oh, great movie. Great movie.
And that's a movie that, and understandably, a lot of people haven't heard of or have no interest in seeing. It's an odd title, but it's easy to remember. Although that's an episode where we accidentally gave it a lower rating than we intended to, but our murderous computer Hal Jr., who we will not talk about on air, screwed us. But so that movie kind of exemplifies to me what we're actually trying to do.
Yeah. It's a good one if you ever get a chance. I know we got to go, but I would love to. I would love to hear your take on it too. Is what is it called? Demon Seed.
Oh yeah.
That's kind of an obscure film. I would love to hear what you guys think of it.
Get that down, Scott.
Yeah.
So watch the episode. I will forget it, but that would be a fun one to tackle.
Again, this is, man, I can go on for hours. This is just truly amazing and just pick your brains. But I want to say, everybody, if you aren't listening to Monster Movie Happy Hour, you better start, because it's a great show. Go check them out. Go rate, review, follow them everywhere. So as you can see, Monsters and Drinks, we're going to have it all in the description so you can follow as well, and go to their website. That will be there too. So I had such a great time. You guys are truly
I did too. Absolutely. It was a good time.
Thank you so much. And I can't wait to have you guys back on the show to talk again.
It's mutual. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody who bothered to listen to us.
Well, I think they all had a great time. And anybody who, like I said, a lot of them are fans already, but anybody who hasn't checked out the show, go check it out now. I highly recommend it. I listened to it, and it's just so much fun. And until next time, I am Mick Manhattan, the Scene Snob. You can check us out on thescenesnobs.com, and I will talk to you later.